Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty. Appreciate you joining me today. We're doing another afternoon live stream today. I did not get a guest lined up soon enough to have an evening live stream for tonight, but I will am planning on having one next week that I'm really excited about. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation with Pastor Guy Beaumont, and he's from Pennsylvania. And if his name's familiar to you, he came on my program several months ago. I did a live stream with a guy named Peter Cratafilo, I think is how you say his name. Accused me of being anti-Semitic, and Pastor Beaumont contacted me, and he kind of came in, defended me, appreciated that, and he's a unique individual, and I like him from what I've seen about him on social media. Never met him in person. But I'll be announcing the topic later, but I think it will be an interesting conversation. So I'm pretty excited about having him on. We just have to confirm for sure the time. Normally we do it at 6 p.m. in the evening. Not positive that's going to work for him. So we might change the time a little bit, but be ready for a live stream with another pastor next week. And I know it'll be an interesting conversation that I think you will enjoy. But today, I do want to talk about the subject of what it means to be effeminate. Our Tuesday mornings, again, they are geared towards men. And this thing of effeminacy is really getting out of control. And it has been going out of control for a really long time. And, I grew up hearing preaching on against being effeminate. And the things that preachers talked about back then that were effeminate, I mean, they almost don't even seem like much anymore in this world of drag queens and queers and all the junk that we've got going on today. But what was interesting is I was studying this because I've noticed, and I've brought this up a lot, and this is kind of one of the things that motivated me to kind of do this subject and kind of go at it the way I'm planning on going at it, in what I call the trendy world, and a lot of your guys going liberal, more modern. One of the things that our crowd often criticizes them for is being effeminate. These skinny jean wearing types, we accuse them of being effeminate. They talk with their soft, sweet voices, and it's just very off-putting to the previous generation. And often, we'll accuse them of being effeminate. We'll use that word. And then they act like they don't know what it means. And they act like, you're just being legalistic and making up your own definitions for things. And I've asked some of these people, what do you think being effeminate is? What do you think that means? And it's clearly a major sin. We're going to look at a passage that's only in the Bible one time, but it's clearly a really big thing. And so it's like, why aren't you guys preaching on it? And supposedly some have said that they have, and I've listened to some of them, but typically when you listen to these guys, if they do preach on the subject, all they do is just talk about things that everyone would agree with. They don't actually get specific and talk about a lot of the stuff that we'll probably be talking about today. But so what I did, I just kind of did a study on the word, the etymology of the word, what it meant in Paul's day to be effeminate. And it's pretty frightening, the stuff that I saw, because it is exactly what we are seeing today in this transgender movement. I mean, it's the exact same thing. And I'm telling you, we are paying a price right now for preachers not preaching on this like they should have. Thank God for the ones who did. But let me tell you something. A lot of preachers have backed off on this, and we're paying the consequences for it right now. And we've got to get back to preaching against this stuff, defining it, calling it out for what it is. So let's look at the one place in the Bible where we see this word. One time we see the word in the Bible. And I'm going to show you, too, why the trendies, you never hear them talking about this. There's several reasons, and not just because they're effeminate. But it says in 1 Corinthians 6:9, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived. Okay, so this is serious. These people aren't going to inherit the kingdom of God. We are not to be deceived by them. And he names some sins that we would all agree are really big deals. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you, but ye are washed, but ye are sanctified, but ye are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. So notice all these sins that were mentioned are ones that any trendy would not be afraid to preach about. I mean, these are things that we would all agree are bad. You know, they might get a little nervous about some of the homosexuality stuff if that's what you believe the abusers of themselves with mankind is. Some people, there's different opinions on that. I'll give it to them. But either way, effeminate, you don't hear them talking about that. Why is that? I mean, it's named with some really bad sins. And even if they do say it, why will they not define it? Because obviously we don't hear this word that often. It is still used in our modern language. It's not a dead word or one of them archaic words for sure. But why is it people aren't talking about it? Well, I think one of the reasons that a lot of your trendy types aren't talking about being effeminate is because that word's not even in their Bible. And let's look at a few other versions and see what it says in 1 Corinthians 6:9. In the ESV, which is seems like it's the new favorite of all the non-King James people, it says, "Or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality." Where's effeminate? It's not in there. So they obviously think, abusers themselves with mankind. That's homosexuals. They obviously have adultery, and they have sexually immoral, which wouldn't that include adultery? But they leave out effeminate. It's just not in the ESV. They left that word out, and that word means something. In the NIV, "Or do you not know that the wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who have sex with men." Effeminate, not there. How about the New King James? The New King James, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites." So I don't know if they think effeminate, that just means a homosexual, but if that's a homosexual, then what's a sodomite? I thought they were the same thing. So you can kind of see why people who aren't King James only aren't talking about that word. It's not in their Bible, but obviously it's a serious thing. These people are not going to inherit the kingdom of God, and we are not supposed to be that way. And so whenever we talk about being effeminate, your typical IFB preacher like myself, we might start ripping on skinny jeans, earrings, long hair, limp wrist, soft voice, talking with a lisp. I do believe that throughout history, being effeminate has probably manifested itself in slightly different ways, even though I'm sure there's a lot of things that it had in common. In fact, and as we go into some of these things, we're going to see there's a lot of things that it still has in common today. But obviously, this is a really big deal. It's a really big sin. And the fact that it's not being preached about is a real problem. And I think the main reason it's not being preached about in a lot of these more liberal churches is because it is very politically incorrect. We are living in a world where we are not supposed to say something is masculine and something is feminine. We have people now saying that gender is a spectrum, which is so dumb. The people who are supposed to be about science are the ones saying this stuff. That is so dumb. And why is there no spectrum in the animal kingdom? It's just with humans. It's absolute insanity what these people are trying to, what they're trying to say about it. So, what is the dictionary definition of effeminate? And basically the dictionary definition on dictionary.com So something a little more modern. It says having traits, tastes, habits, etc. Traditionally, that's why the trendies don't talk about it. They hate that word tradition. How dare you talk about tradition? Traditionally considered feminine as softness or delicacy. So again, there are things that traditionally have been considered masculine and traditionally considered feminine. And people get so bent out of shape by that. Well, that's that terrible patriarchy that's out there. They're the ones that promoted all this stuff. They're the ones, it's this big conspiracy teaching, girls that pink is for girls and blue is for boys. And, we've got to get rid of the patriarchy. We've got to get rid of all this toxic masculinity. And, they want to do whatever they can to blur those lines. They want to do whatever they can to make it not clear what's male and female, what's masculine and feminine, because they want to turn everyone into perverts. That's all there is to it. And so, in the dictionary, again, it says what has been traditionally considered, feminine. It says also in there, this is in the 1828. The 1828 says having the qualities of the female sex, soft or delicate, to an unmanly degree, tender, womanish, voluptuous. And so again, when you start defining, when it comes to these things, it's real easy to say the words, but then when you start displaying it and illustrating it, people get real bent out of shape. And then even your trendies, they want you to demand that you got to show a Bible example to explain all this. And we'll look at an example here in a little bit. But again, some of this stuff can manifest itself different throughout time. And so it uses the word voluptuous, which is a word you don't hear that often, but that means, and pay attention to this, given to enjoyments of luxury and pleasure, indulging to excess in sensual gratifications, or softened with pleasure and voluptuous life. And it gives an example of how that word could be used in the 1828. It says, the king by his voluptuous life and mean marriage became effeminate and less sensible of honor. So when we look at this word effeminate, often it's associated with people who their life is just so easy. They're so surrounded by luxury and things that they just become very weak and effeminate. And isn't that, again, and you know what? This is effeminate. But, ladies, they love going to the nail salon and getting a manicure and a pedicure. And that's like a luxury thing for them, a way they will pamper themselves, is what they'll say. And you know what? I don't have a problem with a lady going and getting her nails done and her hair done and her hair permed, or just doing things to make them feel pretty. If a lady wants to do that kind of thing, fantastic. But if a guy does it, we got a real problem. Listen, I know you're not supposed to bite your nails, but I will bite my nails before I ever go and get a manicure. It's just not going to happen. I don't need that kind of thing. You think I'm gonna let him pamper me with all that stuff? And that is, I'm sorry, I'd have to turn in my man card if I did something like that. You say, how dare you say that? I know lots of men who go get manicures. Well, you probably know a lot of queers too. We don't promote that kind of thing. We don't need that kind of luxury. And we've got a lot of young men today that they spoil themselves with things. They dress in soft, delicate clothing. They do want to be pampered. They've got to always be surrounded in comfort. They can't handle the heat. They can't handle the cold. They can't handle getting dirty. There's something wrong with you as a man if you can't handle getting dirty. You can't handle getting a little sweaty. You ought to be able to handle something like that. And so continuing the definition for effeminate means womanish. This sounds so degrading to women. It's not degrading for a woman to be feminine and for a woman to act like a woman. It's very degrading for a man to act like a woman. It's an abomination. It's disgusting. So womanish, weak, resembling the practice or qualities of the sex as an effeminate peace and effeminate life. woman-like, tender, in a sense, not reproachful. So, you say how dare you say women are weak? They are the weaker sex. They are, we are to give honor unto them as unto the weaker sex, because of the fact that, they're not as strong as men are. At least they're not supposed to be. And I know you can always find some freak of nature out there that's an exception. And you can always find some freak of nature as a man that is just weak and was probably born with something wrong with him and can't help it. But again, we do not promote weakness. We do, some people are born with deformities. They're born with flaws and things that are not good, but we don't promote those things. We don't hate somebody who's, born with some kind of problem that they can't help. But, we don't promote that kind of thing. There's people that I've known who were born with different kinds of diabetes and things. Some guys that I've known. And because of that, they were very, very thin. And just no matter what, they could not gain weight. They had very small arms and were just very weak and sickly looking. You don't hate somebody like that. You should never make fun of somebody like that. You don't pick on that. But you don't promote their skinniness. You don't promote their small arms. You don't celebrate that. You're sad for them because, that's not a healthy way to live, and that's not a healthy way for a man to be. But in our country, we celebrate that kind of thing. The freak show Dylan that's being put on beer cans and promoting all kinds of foolish disgustingness. The first time I saw him on a video, I thought it was somebody making fun. I thought it was somebody making fun of trannies. I thought it was a parody video. And I started watching this, and I looked, and when I realized they were real was when I saw his arms. And when I saw just how small those arms were, it was so unnatural. I was like, nobody is going to do that to themselves physically just for a parody video. Nobody's going to do that. This person, it really is a freak. This person really is trying to convince everyone they're a woman. And it was just absolutely disgusting because guys shouldn't have arms that small. And I don't know, maybe he was born with something messed up too. Maybe he's got some kind of weird diabetes and that's why he's so skinny. But I think he's probably just doing stuff to himself. He clearly is doing stuff to himself to try to make him look like a girl. And so when it comes to this idea of effeminate and like what it meant back in Paul's day, if you look up effeminacy on Wikipedia, I'll read a little bit of this to you, but honestly, I'm not real comfortable reading all of it because some of the subject matter I'm not comfortable talking about, and I'd rather not talk about a lot of these things. But when you read what's on there and what was going on back in that day, it is exactly what we are seeing today. I mean, it is exactly what we are seeing today. And it said this is one part of it. It said for Roman men, masculinity also meant self-control, even in the face of painful emotions, illnesses, or death. Cicero says there exists certain precepts, even laws, that prohibit a man from being effeminate in pain. And Seneca adds, if I must suffer illness, it will be my wish to do nothing out of control, nothing effeminately. So we see even back in Roman day, there was a way that a man was supposed to respond to pain and respond to sickness. And you know what we do? We tough it out. If a lady gets hurt and she's crying about it and, having a meltdown, or if something bad happens and she has an emotional meltdown, we understand that. She's a lady. But, when guys do that, when guys are just, just melting down over the smallest things, and obviously, boy, when you get hurt, you get hurt. You get punched in the nose, you're going to shed some tears. You can't get hit in the nose without your eyes watering. But as a man, you're going to fight it. You're going to try not to. Why? Because it's not a manly thing. It's not a manly trait. Guys are supposed to have their emotions under control, better than women do. And so I read this one. I remember when this happened too, because this was pretty funny. This wasn't that long ago. But just in September of 2021, the Associated Press reported that mainland Chinese government has banned effeminate men from appearing in television commercials. The Chinese government instructed broadcasters to stop showing sissy men. And it's like, why can't we do that? You know, and ours, we've got trannies on recruiting people for the military. You know how messed up that is? Do we really want the weakest of the weak and the lamest of the lame, you know, fighting for our country? But yet that's what they're promoting today. And it's because, and I don't think I'm being extreme when I say this at all, but clearly there is an agenda to destroy this country. And that is why they are promoting the type of perversion that is being promoted in our government and the military. It absolutely is just, without a doubt, you know, an attempt to destroy what's left of this country. And so, well, let's go. I'll go ahead and read a little. So let me read some of this Wikipedia stuff. Hang on a second. Let me get it back up here. But I got to be careful because some of the stuff in here is pretty bad. But it says effeminacy is the embodiment of traits and or expressions in those who are not of the female sex. Boys and men, that are often associated with what is generally perceived to be feminine behaviors, mannerisms, styles, or gender roles. And see, we're not even supposed to believe that that's a thing today. And even trendies get mad when preachers start talking about things and we are saying these things are masculine. It's like, I don't see it in the Bible where it says that's masculine. No, these are things that are traditionally and generally perceived as that. And we're allowed to point those things out. We're allowed to point out how it manifests itself in this day. We are allowed to do these things. We're not just going to ignore this because they're demanding that we do. We don't have to do that. So yeah, doing these feminine behaviors, mannerisms, styles, or gender roles rather than traditionally masculine behaviors, mannerisms, styles, or roles. Effeminacy and other gender expressions are independent of a person's sexuality or sexual identity and are displayed by people of all sexualities and none. Effeminacy is seen in some societies as something embodied by some in the homosexual male community. The embodiment of effeminacy by people in some societies has resulted in prejudice, discrimination, antagonism, and insults towards those who display it. And of course it has, because normal people have always been disgusted by the effeminate, by the homosexual. They've always been disgusted by that. I mean, there have been laws, there are laws against this kind of thing in a massive part of the globe. And there have been laws against this in most of our history in this country because it's disgusting, because it's repulsive, because it's wrong. And so, yes, it has done that and it always will do that. And they are doing everything they can to get people to stop feeling that way. But I'm sorry, there's some of us that are just not getting with the program. There are some of us that believe the Bible, we believe science, we believe nature, we have common sense, we hate disease, you know, we hate things that are gross and repulsive. And so we're not going to go along with this stuff. And so the history of the word, and this is where I got to be careful because some of the stuff I don't think it's appropriate to talk about, but it says effeminate comes from the Latin effeminatus, and I'll probably read all of these Greek word wrongs, but it means made feminine, emasculated, weakened. Another Latin term is mollites, meaning softness. And keep in mind that word softness that's used a lot when talking about that which is effeminate. So when one thing we're going to see when it comes to this word effeminate, we see softness, we see weakness, you know, female-like characteristics, this love and indulgence of luxury. These are things that we see associated with being effeminate or effeminate. And then I don't want to read this next section, but then it goes on to say, it talks about and I'm probably saying this wrong too, Cineatus, which is a man who cross-dresses or flirts like a girl. That's offensive today too, saying something like a girl. Yeah. No, there's a way, a woman would flirt. There is a feminine way to act. And even back in Roman times and in ancient Greek times, they had men who would cross-dress, flirt like a girl. It says, indeed, the word's etymology suggests an indirect sexual act emulating a promiscuous woman. This term has been borrowed from the Greek kanaidios, which may itself have come from a language of Ionian Greeks of Asia Minor, primarily signifying a purely effeminate dancer who entertained his audience with a tympanium or tambourine in his hand and adopted a lascivious style, often suggestively wiggling his buttocks in such a way as to suggest something disgusting. The primary meaning of Cineatus never died out. The term never became a dead metaphor. So, folks, what does that sound like? That sounds like these drag queens. It's exactly what that sounds like. What do? They dress in very provocative ways that sensual and promiscuous women would dress. And they act in very sexual, suggestive ways. And we've seen the videos of them shaking their rear ends in front of kids, just doing disgusting things. I mean, in public. I don't even want to mention some of the things I've seen done in public by some of these freaks. Just absolute disgusting stuff. This kind of stuff was going back in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Greek historian Plutarch recounts that Parander, the tyrant of Ambracia, asked his boy, "Aren't you pregnant yet?" in the presence of other people, causing the boy to kill him in revenge for being treated as if effeminate or a woman. And I can't read all of this stuff too. There's some really disturbing stuff in here that went on. Again, sodomy, pedophilia, cross-dressing, it's all related, folks. There is no LGBTQIASTD, whatever. There are sodomites, is what they all are. They're sodomites. There is no homosexual and pedophile. No, they're all sodomites. They're all sodomites. All of these things are related, and it's very disturbing. The stuff that went on, it's the same kind of thing that was going on today. But one of the things that they had in those ancient Greek and Roman times is they often had boys, young boys, that they would use for their just disgusting desires. And typically, these boys were made to look, dress, act like women. That was one of the things that they did. And I'm telling you, it's really disturbing, the stuff that's going on. But you say, well, then what is manly? What is masculine? Well, I want to read this passage to you from the Bible because this is interesting too. But in Matthew 3:1, it says, "In those days came John the Baptist preaching in the wilderness of Judea and saying, Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he that was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, saying, The voice of one crying in the wilderness, Prepare ye the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. And the same John had his raiment of camel's hair and a leather girdle about his loins, and his meat was locusts and wild honey." So, when you look at John the Baptist, you kind of picture a wild man. You kind of picture a wilderness man. You picture, and yes, this is really live. You picture somebody that's manly. And for sure, he was. And Jesus talked about that in Matthew 11:7. It says, "And as they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John, What went ye out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind?" Hey, what's he talking about there? Did you go all the way out in the wilderness to listen to a guy who's like a politician who just goes along with the wind, like a reed shaking the wind? Which way does the reed lean? Whichever way the wind's blowing. gets moved around, shaken in the wind. John the Baptist wasn't somebody like that. John the Baptist was somebody who went against the flow, who did what he was, he was a man who stood up and stood against kings, pointed the finger in the face of kings, said, "It is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife," who died for his faith. That's the kind of guy that he was. And so Jesus, man, you didn't go out to see somebody like that. And then he said, "But what went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment?" And what does that mean? Soft raiment. We've been seeing that word soft used a lot when talking about the effeminate. Somebody who's soft, somebody who's weak, somebody who looks like they can't handle a lot, or even someone who is given over to luxuries and just indulging themselves on whatever lasciviousness they can, just pampering themselves. And he said, were you expecting to find someone in soft raiment? No, they found a guy with camel's hair and a leather girdle. Okay, this guy wasn't somebody in soft raiment. What are they? He said, because he says, "Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses." And if you look up that word soft there, it says a man of feeble and effeminate character, unable to bear trials and hardships. And so, again, there is a way that people dress who do hard work. There's a way that people dress. And yeah, Trapper John, I am on here live right now. I don't know why you think I'm not, but yeah, this is live. But there's a way people dress when they are going to work, when they are going to do manual labor. There's a way that you could expect that person to dress, and there's a way you wouldn't expect them to dress. And so you got soft raiment, those who were in king's houses. Now, what's he talking about there too? And if you look that up, it uses a word that means one of the definitions for soft is, it says in the Greek dictionary, a catamite. Okay, and what is a catamite? Well, if you look that up, it's a boy kept for unnatural purposes. That's what it says in the Webster's 1828 dictionary. And so that soft raiment that it's talking about just these luxurious things, something made to wear for just relaxing and an easy life, like some boy toy in a king's house, some guy who's given himself over to voluptuous living, just giving themselves over to whatever sensual desires. There is a way they look, there's a way they dress, and it's soft, it's effeminate. And I'm telling you, John the Baptist wasn't like that. And Jesus said, you didn't go out in the wilderness to see somebody like that. You didn't go out there you went out there to see a man. And that is exactly what they found with a guy like John the Baptist. So just understand that, these things are, kind of the same as it is today. Look at the way these effeminate people dress. Look at the way they are just so obsessed with, their luxuries. And they just got, and, this new generation, the Gen Zers, the millennials, they just have to have the best of everything, name brand this, name brand that. I mean, they're a victim if they're not drinking, they don't have a cup of Starbucks in their hand. Just, got to drink the most expensive drinks and coffee, and just, they got to have the best of everything. They need everything as easy as possible. They can't handle anything. And this is a terrible, terrible trait, but it is our culture today. And then we're surprised that we got a bunch of dudes going around in dresses and people switching genders and all that kind of stuff. This is absolutely out of control. And just understand, this is a really bad thing. And so kind of back to 1 Corinthians 6:9. So we looked at all those other versions of the Bible that just leave the word effeminate out. That's just gone. They don't even have another word replacing it. It's just gone. It's not there. But in the Geneva Bible, I looked up this word in the Geneva Bible, or this verse, and notice what it says there. It says, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor wantons, nor buggers. And, bugger or buggery, that's referring to homos, but it also mentions wantons. Now, we don't hear that word very often, but that word is in our King James Bible too. And it's interesting. We're not going to go to all the examples, but interestingly enough, one of the examples, James 5:5, says, "Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter." So he's telling them, like, you've been living in pleasure. You have been wanton. You've just been people giving yourselves over to luxuries. And that is where we are in our country today. That is why we have the kind of stuff that we have going on in our country today, because we are spoiled. We are filthy rich as a society. We are spoiled. We have been wanton. People have just been given all these luxuries. You feel like you're a victim if you don't have all these luxuries. I mean, if you don't, you've got to have so many weeks of vacation from work. You can only work, if you got to work more than 8 hours a day, boy, I mean, God forbid you have to do that. You better get some overtime, double overtime. You don't want to do any kind of physical labor. You're always in air conditioning in the summer, heat in the winter. You don't do anything difficult. You've been wanton. You've been just nourishing yourself up, and it's made you weak. And that is how we are as a society. We are weak. Men can't handle anything. And the solution to this, thing is fathers. Okay, fathers, we've got to promote this. Our society, they do not like us talking about something being manly or something being feminine. That is politically incorrect. And the TV shows they're removing all that kind of thing, just gender distinction. They're not going to do it. But folks, I'm not going to raise, drag queens. I'm not going to raise a bunch of queers. And, my boys are growing up now, and they definitely are not those things. But it wasn't by accident. Okay? It wasn't by accident. The things, I had to teach them these things while society's trying to unteach them these things. And so one of the problems we have today is the family has fallen apart. We don't have fathers in the home like we are intended to have. And as a result of that, a lot of young men they're not being taught certain things. If they're not in a good church, they're probably just not being taught. And if they are going to a public school, they for sure are being taught lies when it comes to this stuff. And so just some things I just want to encourage fathers. Okay, fathers, you have to keep your marriage together. You have to keep your homes together. You have to raise those kids. You have to raise those boys, because nobody is going to promote these things for you. This is your job to do it. And one of the things that we need to promote is manliness, but specifically things that are manly and not effeminate, and that is strength. You need to promote strength with your boys. And that it is not a virtue to, have skinny little twig legs. All right. Okay. I get it. A lot of people wearing skinny jeans, and I guess it's popular to have skinny legs, but you know what? That's not manly. You don't promote that kind of thing with your boys. You know what you do? You make fun of that stuff. Yeah, societies used to be very hostile towards the effeminate. We need that. If we embrace that, if we are supportive of that, we can't be surprised when our boys go that direction. No, they need to be tough. They need to be strong. You need to promote that. You need to put them to work. You need to give them difficult jobs to do. And I get it. We have technology today. I'm glad, we don't have to work super hard physically to survive. But at the same time, we need to work hard physically. And so, you know what? If you need to, teach them to exercise, get them involved in sports, promote these kind of things that will strengthen them, get them outside. Have them dig holes, have them mow the grass, have them cut down the trees, have them, do something physical, have them work in the sun, have them work when it's hot, let them sweat, let them get dirty. Okay. Moms, I know a lot of times you have to clean these boys up And that's hard, you let your boys get dirty and them tear their clothes up and all that kind of stuff. But what would you rather have, Mom? A boy that you got to spend a little extra time cleaning up when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, or, and have holes in their jeans that they earned, or have one of these queer little effeminate dudes that's never going to leave your house, that you're going to be cooking and cleaning for when he's in his 20s, and, who's got holes in his jeans now because he made you spend, $60 to go buy him jeans that were already tore up. I'm telling you, you need to put up with that. Yeah, they're going to track in the house sometime. Just listen, if you have little kids, it's pointless trying to turn your house into a museum now. Don't buy nice things. Don't buy nice furniture. Get used stuff. They're going to destroy it. You know what? Get all that nice stuff after they grow up and they're out of the house. Because you know what? You need your boys to be tough. And so somebody asked, what do we do in the scenario where we are divorced? Well, again, when you get divorced, this is what you got to understand. This isn't just about you and your wife now. I mean, you are putting your children at a huge disadvantage, and it can still be done. People do it, by all means, don't give up. But just understand the best thing you do is just don't get divorced. But if you are divorced, you have to stay in your kid's life. You have to. And so, you know what? Pay that alimony, pay that child support, do whatever you have to do to make sure that, you have the rights to be in your kids' lives, because they need, they need this stuff promoted, and you got to do everything you can. And you're just going to have to do double effort of everyone else, but you've got to get it done. I mean, you have to get it done. We can't keep turning out the kind of people we're turning out. I mean, some of the numbers I'm hearing, I don't even know if I believe it, but some of the numbers I'm hearing about people now who are like confused about their gender and sexual orientation and stuff like that. I mean, if these numbers are even close to true, what they're saying, we've got a real problem on our hands. I mean, we are real close, if not there, to being Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's just not acceptable. And so, dads, promote strength, get them involved and get them interested in manly activities, and the wimpier and the more effeminate your boy is, the more extreme of a sport or something you might need to get him to. You might need to get him into boxing and stuff. And it's like, and I know Mom's going to freak out. What if he gets a bloody nose or something? Well, it's fine. It'll toughen him up. There's a lot worse things that can happen to you than getting beat up. And that can actually be really good for you. Get them involved in football. Make them do things hard. Have them overcome challenges. These are really important things that you need to do. And it's your job as parents to promote it. Nobody's going to do it for you. Promote toughness, physically and emotionally. Teach your boys to walk it off when they get hurt. Again, I'm not saying, obviously there's a time and a place to cry, but you have to cry about everything. I mean, you have to let everything cause you to have an emotional breakdown. I mean, come on, listen, life's hard sometimes. You got to suck it up. You got to be tough. You have to promote that kind of thing. And that means, if your boys are going to learn how to act like boys and how not to act like girls, you have to explain what that is. And you know what that means? When your boy starts crying like a little girl, you need to tell him, don't cry like a little girl. Well, that's degrading towards women. No, it's not degrading for women to act like women and for girls to act like girls. It is degrading when a boy does it. And so you need to call that stuff out. You need to say, this toy is for girls. Boys, you don't play with dolls. Boys, we don't play dress up. We don't play house. We play build the house or tear down the house or something like that. We do man things. We do tough things. We buy weapons. You obviously, when they were little kids, you don't give them real ones, but you get them some toy ones. You promote weapons. You promote toughness. You get them swords. You promote that kind of thing. And you make them tough. You wrestle with them. You do these things, and and promote that toughness, strength. Teach them to be protective too. People act like, if we teach them to be strong and tough, they're just going to abuse women. Not if we also teach them to be protective. Not if we also teach them to give honor unto the wife and unto women as unto the weaker vessels. You need to teach them you don't hit a girl. And why not? Why can't we hit girls? Why guys not girls? Because they're girls. Because they're weaker. Because you're a punk if you hit a girl. And we don't. And as guys, we don't do that. And that we've got to promote that kind of thing. But all that's politically incorrect. And then we've got, women too, wondering why, they get all this disrespect and stuff. Well, because if we're actually taught why we're supposed to respect them, that goes against your agenda too. So, dads, you've got to promote these things. These characteristics they are up to you. You need to teach your boys to dress like a man. And one thing that will help with that is if you do not allow them to get infatuated with effeminate types. If you allow your boy to listen to Michael Jackson, I know he's dead now, and that guy was as feminine as all get out. You let him follow a guy like Michael Jackson, he's going to want to start dressing like him. He's going to want to act like him, dance like him, talk like him. And, you need to promote, manly stuff. Find real men, godly men, masculine men. You promote that kind of thing and, teach them to, and they'll want to dress like them. And you need to teach them that a woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man. Neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are an abomination. And it not only is it an abomination to God for there to be cross-dressing, but it needs to be an abomination to you. When I was growing up, it was an abomination to my father to see this type of thing, and he taught me to be disgusted by it too. I remember the first time I remember seeing a tranny. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and we were in the grocery store, and there was this big dude, tall dude, 100% a dude, no doubt about it, wearing a dress and like and a hat, I don't know kind of hat you'd explain, but it was very feminine hat, very feminine dress, and just going through the grocery store like that. And you know what my dad pointed out, I was like, look at that guy in a dress. That is disgusting. And you know what we did? We laughed at him. And then on the way back, my dad talked about how disgusting that was and how messed up that was. And we were taught to despise that kind of thing. And that dude, for sure, without a doubt, was 100% pervert. And I could tell a lot more stories about things like that growing up that my parents did to show me that this is not acceptable and you don't ever want to be like that. And my dad he'd tell you, don't act like a girl. And not only did he say, we're not supposed to dress like women, women aren't supposed to dress like men, he wasn't afraid to say what that was like. And, I always tell my wife, because, people ask her why she wears skirts. And, she'll always often tell me, because I'm a Christian and everything. I always tell her, just say it's because you're a woman. Just tell people that. Okay? Because here's the thing. I'm a Christian, but even if I wasn't a Christian, I'm pretty sure I'd still dress like a man. I'm pretty sure I still wouldn't wear a skirt. I don't think dressing like a man and dressing like a woman has to be a Christian thing. I think it should just be a man or a woman thing. And so just tell people that. It's because I'm a woman. That's what I always tell her to say. She doesn't usually, she's not as rude about some of that stuff as I am, but that's what I would say. So teach your boys to act like men. They are the protectors. They shouldn't sit, walk, talk like a woman. They shouldn't cross their legs like a woman. I saw this one preacher, as feminine as all get. He's sitting there with his legs crossed like a woman does, like a woman. I don't see in the Bible where it says how you have to cross your legs. I don't either, but I do see it in society and nature. And there's a way women sit, and there's a way that men sit. And this guy sitting there like a woman, and people do, and they'll flaunt that in your face. They flaunt all this effeminacy in your face. No, when I see that kind of thing, I've always pointed out to my boys, look at that dude. That's messed up. That's wrong, because I don't want him picking up on that kind of thing. This stuff is being shoved down our throats. We've got to identify these things and point them out and steer our kids away from it. Teach your boys to talk like a man. There's no virtue in having a high, soft voice. And that's great for a woman, who's supposed to have a meek and quiet spirit. But men, we don't need to talk like that. That's not good. You don't need to talk like a lisp. And I'm tired of this too. I am so tired of going to restaurants, and it's like the modern Gen Zer teenager polite voice is to like talk like a homo. And I have stood there and I have swore. I mean, these guys were so, hi, welcome to Culver's. How may I take your order? They sounded so effeminate that I was sure they were queer. And then they get done taking our order, and then I'll be waiting for the food, and then I'll hear them talking to their coworkers, and they're talking like a man. It's like, please use that voice with me. Use the deep voice. Use the gruff voice with me. That's not polite. That's repulsive. I don't want to hear you talking like that, but it's like people think that's what the polite voice is. You need to make fun of that kind of thing. Your boys talk like that. You need to call them out for it. Okay, if they have a high voice before they hit puberty, give them a break, all right? Their voice will change eventually. But, don't, if your 8, 9, 10-year-old has a high voice, it's fine, okay? Nature will kick in, and that will eventually change. But again, when they're talking with a lisp, just, I don't know. I don't even want to imitate it. I don't want to embarrass myself. Teach your boys to look people in the eye. Teach them how to have a good, strong handshake. Don't let them have a dead fish handshake. If your boy has a dead fish handshake, and just, you know what? You make them do some exercise to help with those things. You have him go swing an axe for a while. You have him do something that'll give him some calluses on his hands. Go buy those things you can squeeze to help with your grip, stuff like that. Do that kind of thing, because you don't want weak boys. Teach them to, to have boldness, to not be afraid. It's sad how few people know how to talk to people. They don't know how to be respectful, be polite, how to be decisive. Teach them to work like a man. Teach them to work long hours. Teach them not to quit and to get tired. And boy, you see some of these little doughboy gamers out there too. And listen, I'm not against letting your kids play some video games sometimes. Some dads are like, no video games. Oh, okay, all right, that's fine. I always taught my boys you had to earn the video games. And if they worked hard during the day, played hard, whatever, I didn't have a problem with them spending some time doing that kind of thing. But I've seen some of these kids, man, you see them, they're outside, they're just pale white. Just, you could tell it's like they've never seen the sun. Hey, let your kid get sunburnt. Let your kid get dirty. They need to be outside. They need some toughness. They need to learn how to endure trials. People, they give up on everything. We've got, people just chasing around the easy job, chasing around luxuries. And even spiritually too, people are always just trying to go wherever there's no challenge. And they'll go somewhere, where things are booming, where things are great, but any kind of spiritual challenge comes, they bail. You know why? Because they've not been taught to endure anything. They've never toughed anything out. And that is not a good place to be spiritually. And we've got to promote this toughness. We need strong men today more than ever. And our world is not producing them. This culture is not producing them. And even a lot of Baptist churches, Christian schools, a lot of Baptist Bible colleges aren't producing them. Some of the guys coming out of these Bible colleges is just absolutely repulsive. Just how effeminate these dudes are. I was at a wedding one time, and there was a bunch of guys from a Baptist college there, and honestly, I was horrified at how effeminate all these dudes were. They were soft, like what we've been talking about, just given over to just luxury, voluptuous, and they dressed in soft clothes. It absolutely made me sick. And you know what I told my wife? Our kids were pretty young. Our boys were pretty young then. But I remember when I saw all those boys and I knew they were all from the same Bible college, I told my wife, I said, that Bible college, out for our boys. That was what I told her. It's just when I saw those guys, like, I refuse to send my boys someplace that's turning out dudes like that. That is not good. That is not acceptable. And so effeminate, it's female qualities. And you know what? If I have to explain what those things are to you, it just shows you how bad things are in our society. And dads, you got to point out what those things are. You got to explain it to your kids, and you got to tell your boys, that's what girls do. This is what guys do. This is what men do. If your boy, if your boys always want to eat salads instead of steak and meat, I'd work on that. I was like, no, we're men. We eat animals. Okay? If my son would have ever come to me and it's like, Dad, I want to be a vegetarian, we'd have had a problem right there. My girls, I wouldn't have cared as much. I still probably would have tried to talk. I would probably try to talk them out of it. But my boys never one time asked if they could be a vegetarian. They never even hinted at that. But we eat animals every day. Every day we eat an animal because we are members of PETA, people eating tasty animals. And so that's a manly thing to do. And you know what? If I am 100% for going and killing those animals and eating them, or catching those fish and eating them. And you have to kill them before you eat them too. That's what we do. As men, we subdue the earth. We have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowls of the air and over the beasts of the field. We have dominion over these things, and we promote that kind of thing. And our world, nothing's masculine, nothing's feminine, everything's okay, it's all spectrum. No, folks, that is garbage. And we have got to preach truth, and more churches need to be preaching the truth about this stuff. They need to get back in a King James Bible so they can start talking about being effeminate and calling this stuff out. You can be effeminate and still not be a sodomite. But you can't tell that from reading other Bibles. And there's a lot of straight guys out there that are still effeminate. They're weak. They're voluptuous. They're giving themselves over to luxury. They can't handle anything difficult. And that is unacceptable to God. And it should be unacceptable to you. And it's definitely unacceptable to me as a father for my kids. And so I hope you dads will promote this kind of stuff, and you teach your kids what it means to be effeminate, your boys what it means to be effeminate, and make sure they don't do it, because it will ruin their life. And the last thing we need are more of those, whatever that Greek word was I was trying to read, which today we call drag queens. It's the last thing we need. So with that, I appreciate you all watching this. Thank you all. And next week, be prepared. We will have an evening live stream with special guests. So God bless you. We'll see you all then.